Chapter 23. You Can't Pray a Lie. We didn't dare stop again at any town for days and days. We kept right along down the river. We had got down south now, in the warm weather, and a long way from home. We began to come to trees with Spanish moss on them, hanging down from the limbs like long gray beards. It made the woods look solemn and dismal. Then the Duke and the King thought they would be safe to begin work the villages again. First, they had a lecture on temperance, but didn't make enough to get drunk on. In another village, they started a dancing school, but they didn't know any more about how to dance than a kangaroo does. Other times, they tackled telling fortunes and doctoring and preaching, but they didn't have any luck. At last, they got just about dead broke and loafed around the raft as she floated along, never saying anything for half a day at a time, in a dreadful blue and desperate. Then they took a change and began to lay their heads together in the wigman, talking low for hours at a time. Jim got uneasy, and so did I. We didn't like the look of it. We judged they would think up some devilly worse than ever. They might be planning to break into a house or store, or make counterfeit money or something. We were pretty scared. We downed the river because he had run away, and if she didn't, everybody just naturally despises an ungrateful slave, and they would make Jim feel it all the time, orny and disgraced. And then think of me. It would get around the Huck Finn helped a slave run away. At last it hit me all of a sudden. This was the hand of Providence slapping me in the face for my wickedness. I was being watched up there in heaven all the time. I was stealing a poor old woman's slave. The more I thought, the more my conscience went down grinding me, and the more wicked and low down I got to feeling. I made up my mind to pray and see if I couldn't be better. So I kneeled down, but the words wouldn't come. Why? It was because my heart wasn't right. I wasn't being square. I was playing double. I was pretending to give up sin, but I was holding on to the biggest sin of all. I was trying to make my mouth say I would do the right thing and write to Jim's owner and tell where he was, but it was a lie. You can't pray a lie. I found that out. So I was full of trouble and didn't know what to do. At last I had an idea. I said, I'll go and write the letter, and then see if I can pray. So I got a piece of paper and a pencil, all glad and excited, and sat down and wrote, Miss Swanson, your runaway slave, Jim, is down here 2 mile, Picksville, and Mr. Phelps has got him, and we will give him for a reward if you send. Huck Finn. I felt good and all washed clean of sin for the first time in my life, and I knew I could pray now. But then I kept thinking over our trip down the river, floating along, talking and singing and laughing. I thought how good Jim was to me, sometimes standing in my watch so I could go on sleep, and how glad he was when I turned up, out the fog, how he would always call me honey and pet me and do everything he could for me. I took up the letter and held it in my hand. I was trembling because I got to decide, forever, betwixt two things, and I knew it. I studied a minute, sort of holding my breath, and then said to myself, all right then, I'll go to hell, and it tore it up. It was awful thoughts and awful words, but they were said. And I let them stay said. I would take up wickedness again, which was in my line being brought up to it, and the other wasn't. For a starter, I would go and steal Jim out of slavery again, and if I could think up anything worse, I would do that too. As long as I was in sin and for good, I might as well go for the whole log. Then I set to thinking, and at last fixed up a plan that suited me. So I took the bearings of Woody Island that was down a river a piece, and as soon as it went fairly dark, I crept out with my raft and went for it. I hid the raft and turned in and slept the night through. Next morning, I got up before it was light, had my breakfast, tied up some things in a bundle, and took the canoe and went for the shore. I landed below where I judged Phelps' place was and hid my bundle in the woods. Then I filled up the canoe with water and loaded rocks into her, and sunk her where I could find her again later, when I wanted her. Then I struck up the road that went by a little steam sawmill on the bank. When I passed the mill, I saw a sign on it, Phelps Sawmill. A farmhouse was 200 or 300 yards farther along. I kept my eyes peeled, but didn't see anybody around, though it was good daylight now. But I didn't want to see anybody just yet. I only wanted to get the lay of the land. I planned to turn up that farmhouse as coming from the village, not far below it. So I just took a look and then shoved along, straight for the town. Well, the very first man I saw when I was there was the Duke. He was sticking up a bill for the Royal Nonsuch, 3-night performance. I was right on him. I could duck. He looked surprised and said, hello, where did you come from? Then he said, kind of glad and eager, where's the raft? Got her in a good place, I said. Why, I was going to ask you that. Then he didn't look so joyful and said, what was your idea for asking me? Well, when I saw the king yesterday, I thought it would be hours before he would be sober enough for you to get back to the raft. So I went loafing around town to put it in time. A man offered me 10 cents to help him row a skiff over the river to bring back a sheep. So I went along, but the sheep broke away when we tried to get him on the boat, and we had to chase him all over the country. It was dark before we caught him and got back on this side of the river. I started down for the raft, and when I got there, it was gone. I slept in the woods all night. But what did become of the raft and Jim? Poor Jim. I blamed if I know what happened to the raft. That old fool had made a trade and got $40. When we found him, he had gambled away every cent of it, but what he had spent for whiskey. When I got him back to the river, the raft was gone. We said, that little rascal stole the raft and left us. I wouldn't go leave my only slave, would I? Well, the raft was gone and we flat broke. There was nothing to do but try the royal nonsense again. I'm dry as a powder horn. Where is the 10 cents? Give it here. I had some money but didn't want to know. So when I let him have the 10 cents, I begged him to spend it for something to eat and to give me some of it, because I hadn't anything to eat since yesterday. He didn't answer. The next minute he whirled on me and said, "Do you reckon that slave would blow on us? We would skin him if he did." "How can he blow? Hasn't he run off?" "No, the old fool sold him for $40 and never divided with me, and the money is gone." "Sold him?" I said and began to cry. "Why, he was my slave." "Well, your slave is gone, so dry up your blubbering. Look here. Do you think you would venture to blow on us? Why, if you dare to blow on us—" He stopped, but I never saw the Duke look so ugly out of his eyes. I went on crying and said, "I don't want to blow on anybody. I don't have time. Anyhow, I got to go find him." He looked bothered and stood there with his bills fluttering on his arm, thinking and wrinkling up his forehead. At last he said, "I'll tell you something. We got to be 3 days. If you promise you won't blow and won't let him blow, I'll tell you where to find him." I promised, and he said, "A farmer by the name of Silas Foot," and then he stopped. I saw he started telling me the truth when he stopped and began to study. I reckoned he was changing his mind, and so he was. He wouldn't trust me, and he wanted me to get out of the way for 3 days. The man that bought him is named Abras Foster, Abraham G. Foster. He lives 40 miles back in the country on the road to Lafayette. "All right," I said. "I can walk it in 3 days. I'll start this very afternoon." "No, you won't. You'll start now. And you don't do any gabbling, by the way. Just keep a tight tongue in your head and move right along. And then you won't get in any trouble with us. Do you hear? You can tell Mr. Foster whatever you want to. Maybe you can get him to believe that Jim is your slave. Some idiots don't ask for papers. At least I've heard there's such down south here. And when you tell him the handbill offering the reward is bogus, maybe he'll believe you when you explain to him why we got out of the handbill offering the reward. Go along now. Tell him anything you want to, but don't work your jaws any between here and there." I left and struck for the back country. I didn't look around, but I felt that he was watching me. I went straight out in the country as much as a mile before I stopped. Then I doubled back through the woods toward Phelps. I reckoned I had better start in on my plan right off, because I wanted to stop Jim's mouth so these fellows couldn't get away. I didn't want any trouble with them. All I wanted was to be entirely rid of them.